Everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle in which today we are taking up the notion daring to strive. This is the week of Buddha Purnima, which usually happens on the full moon day in the month of May, when the Buddha is said to, at least symbolically, have been born, gained enlightenment, and passed beyond this lifetime, on that one day, the full moon in May. And it's interesting, we were just talking about the full moon, Chandrama. And so this idea of daring to strive certainly occurs in the Buddhist tradition. It also occurs in the Hindu tradition, and no doubt in absolutely any spiritual tradition we were to take up. There is a lot to get past in order to progress along a spiritual path. And that daring, that light of daring is evidently, we're going to take up the study, but is evidently a clue to us traveling that path. So I'd like to present Ramdas Lamb, who is a religious studies professor at UH Manoa, and who spent 9 years as someone who was in a monastic tradition in India, very traditional ascetic monk kind of role for 9 years until he came back to America and rejoined the rest of us, all to our benefit. And so Ramdas, if you would.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about asceticism because we're going to really dare to strive. Let's look at the intensity with which some people strive, and then we can step back from it and say, what can we do as regular people who haven't committed our lives to that degree of striving on the external level. So when I was an ascetic, we did practices, kept silence, fasted, didn't sleep for long periods, and these kinds of things. And the idea was that you do the things that you're most afraid of. So for me, I loved eating, so I had to fast, right? And people who love to talk would keep silence. And sometimes, I mean, my teacher's teacher, for example, called Dada Guru, he kept silence for 12 years. And when I asked him why he kept silence, he just said, nothing to say, right? And that was it. Meher Baba kept silence for the bulk of his, a significant portion of his life. A variety of people have done things like that. I know people who have fasted to the point where they no longer kept their body. In fact, within the Jain tradition, that's pretty standard for monks. You're supposed to eventually, when you get to the point of letting go of your desires to eat and your desire to drink anything, and then finally your desire to continue in the body. And it's called salekana, and it's a ritual that they do. And sometimes it takes 2 years of preparation. So these are our strivings. These are the kinds of strivings that we are told, or at least many people say that the Buddha attempted or practiced and then gave up. I know Buddhists who say they don't think he actually did, because for him, the middle path meant, oh, you can eat once a day. So the Buddha's middle path would be extreme for most Buddhists today. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to do. What we do have to is we have to dare ourselves to do that which is uncomfortable. Because the things that are uncomfortable are the things that teach us. We're never taught with things that are comfortable. They just help us to relax. But we're not learning the hard lessons of life. So in the ascetic tradition, which I'm most involved with, the idea once again is make it difficult. If something is comfortable for you, then strive and be willing to do it, because what you'll find is you'll find a strength. And I think I've mentioned before when I talk here is that I'll have my students keep, especially my upper division students and my graduate students, I have fast for a day and keep silence for a day. And my graduate students, I'll have them take a vow for an entire semester to do something, and they choose the thing they want to do, but something that's going to be difficult for them to do, but something they know they probably need to do. If they're smoking cigarettes, I have them take a vow to not smoke cigarettes, or if they're not eating healthy, a vow to start eating healthy, things like that. But striving, pushing ourselves, constantly pushing ourselves to do more, to do better. We either grow or we die. And so part of the growth process is sprouting new leaves, reaching out more, reaching out further. So we grow, we expand. So that's what the ascetic traditions kind of promote. Now, how can we take that approach to life into everyday life? Those of us who are not ascetics, those of us who want to just live a good life, but also grow and learn to challenge ourselves and to really become independent, because that's what independence is. I noticed Vina Howard-G is with us today. I just actually wrote it on a book that she wrote, Gandhi's Ascetic Activism. Terrific, absolutely. Vina-ji, what a terrific book. I mean, just such a wonderful book. And Gandhiji's message to us was strive, right? And he constantly did. He never sought to be comfortable. He sought to learn. He sought to grow. And how can we do that in a way that's fulfilling? Because, I mean, it's like anything. I go to the gym and you see, it's interesting. I think some of the people that I see there must be there all the time, because no matter when I go, if I go day or night, those people are there, right? And they're constantly pushing themselves. That's what we need to do. We need to strive. But I think one of the most important for many of us, and let's get away from the physical stuff and start thinking about the mental and the emotional stuff. How can we strive? Well, first of all, we have to fear our fear, right? And all of us are raised with fears. I mean, fear, don't go out. The night monsters are going to get you, or don't go out this at night because of this, and kids don't talk to strangers, and so many things, well-meaning, albeit we're taught from very early on to be afraid. We're not taught necessarily to open and be open to life, and in some situations it's not too wise to be too open, and depending upon the situation that you're in. But we're taught fear. And what does fear do? Fear blocks us from experience, because if those fears limit what we're able to learn, what we're able to experience, then it limits our ability to grow. And if it limits our ability to grow, it limits our ability to expand our consciousness and see ourselves and know ourselves in all things. My mom, basically village woman. That's the one thing she always taught me. Don't be afraid. She always told me, God will protect you. Don't worry, God will protect you. Of course, then she worried about me all the time. But that's what moms do. But she really encouraged me to just go out and experience the world and experience life, and that's why I've spent so much time traveling and those kinds of things, because I wanted to learn. And the most important for us things to learn are the things that we're afraid of, right? So as a monk, for example, I used to go out when I lived in the Himalayas. I would go up to where the bears were in the mountains, because I was afraid of bears. So I figured, well, if I'm afraid of bears, then that's where I need to go. I need to go where the bears are and try to deal with that fear and just to experience that, because fear, it's amazing what fear does to us, how it closes us down, how it prevents us from being able to really be happy, right? So we want to be happy, we have to overcome our fears. And so that's the first thing. So to strive to overcome your fears, right? And fears are often caused by ignorance, okay? we don't, I mean, in India, I hear about people, people are afraid of cobras, for example. Yeah, cobras are deadly. Well, also cobras are very slow. So a rattlesnake is much worse than a cobra, even though the poison of a rattlesnake is not as deadly as the poison of a cobra. Rattlesnakes are fast, cobras are slow. So we don't need to be afraid of them. And I remember when I was a kid, afraid of tarantulas. Well, actually, tarantulas are not that much of a problem, right? So those kinds of things. So we're given fears, and we have to learn to overcome, see which fears are valid and which fears are not. People. Who are we afraid of? Oh, the people who look different, the people who think different, the people who believe different. Why are we afraid of them? Well, we're afraid of them because we've been told we're afraid of them. I remember I was very much into being a Catholic when I was a little kid, because that was my mom, Italian, Southern Italian Catholic. And I was in the Boy Scouts. And Boy Scouts were going to go on a camping trip. And it was 2 weeks in the summer. So I used to go to church every Sunday, and I found out there was no Catholic church where I was going to be going. And so I asked my priest, and I found out there was a Lutheran church there. So I thought, oh, I'll go to the Lutheran church. But I thought, well, I'll just ask the priest just to be safe, right? So I said to the priest, so I'm going on this camping and there's no Catholic church. So is it okay if I go to the Lutheran church? He goes, oh no. And immediately I kind of jumped startled. Oh no. I said, why not? Oh, well, because they don't teach properly. They're not real Christians. So he wanted me to be afraid of them. He was obviously afraid of them, right? And I thought, I don't understand that. So I went home and I asked my mom. She said, no, it's okay. It's okay. All churches are God's houses. Right? And so, but it's those kinds of fears that we're taught. Fear of people who believe different, people who look different. We know what that is, right? People who think different too. I mean, how many times, oh yeah, don't listen to that person. You can't believe that person. Why? Well, because they disagree with me, right? And so often in our lives, we are taught these things to fear. And it does come from ignorance. It's because, and that's what prejudice is. And if you think about it, prejudice is prejudgment, right? So I make judgments about people that I never knew. I don't know, I will never know, but I make judgments because they belong to a particular group, whether it's a racial group or an ethnic group or a religious group or some sort of group that I've been taught to be afraid of, right? And so that's where prejudices come from. They come out of ignorance because we never actually meet the people that we're prejudiced of, because this whole entire group, this whole group I don't like, even though I maybe have never even met anybody from that group, or maybe one or two of the millions, right? So ignorance leads to fear. Fear leads to resentment, because I don't want to be around somebody who I'm afraid of, which is why the mystic traditions say, don't fear God, love God. These people say we should fear God. Well, who wants to be around somebody that you're afraid of, right? I mean, if I'm afraid of somebody, I don't want to be around them. So this idea of, we have to fear God. Well, why? Let's get away from that concept, and use love as a way of communicating with the world and with the divine. So ignorance leads to fear. Fear leads to resentment. Resentment leads to hatred. Right? My wife hates rats because she's scared to death of them. If we're not afraid of somebody, there's no reason to hate them, right? So in order for people to get us to hate something, they have to show us how we have to be afraid of them. And so then we get back to this idea of fear. But for my wife, when she was a little kid, they had a dog, and she reached into the dog bag to get some food for the dog, and a rat ran up around. Actually, it was probably a little mouse about an inch long, but in her retelling of it, it was this huge rat, the size of a cat, right? And so, fear turns into hate, right? Hate, what does hate do to us? Hate causes us to justify violence, right? And so much of the violence of the world comes from hatred. I mean, if you don't hate somebody, why do you want to destroy them? you hate them for a reason. You hate them because they have something I want, right? Or you hate them because I've been taught that they're like this, and oh yeah, you know, these people are this way and these people are this way. So we have to hate them. And so hate to violence. And so that this chain of functioning is, we have to step back, and let's go all the way back to the beginning now. Ignorance of others. So we have to learn what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be a member of any group? I ask my students often in my world religion classes, and I talk about the various religions. So they say to me, which religion is the right one? And I ask them, well, do you know of any religion in which everybody is good? And they go, no, because they know in their religion, not everybody's good. And then I ask them, do you know any religion in which everybody's bad? And they go, no. And I go, okay, well, then it's probably not the religion that's the right one. It's you. Who are you? How do you deal with things? How do you approach life? Do you approach life in a way that is good and beneficial, or that is harmful and egotistical and like that, right? So we have to move away from our ignorance and our fear and and that fear keeps us very narrow-minded. We're afraid. We're afraid to look beyond out here, so we don't learn. William James, in his Variety of Religious Experience, he says, many people think they're thinking when they're merely rearranging their prejudices. So it's like, I think, oh, this is right. Oh, no, now this is right. Oh, now this is right. Oh, now this is right. I've never expanded myself. I've simply moved my prejudices from one spot to another. And so we have to constantly challenge that fear, constantly challenge that kind of, that the need to strive, the need to, the fear to strive, the fear to go beyond, move beyond our borders, move beyond our boxes. I often talk to my students about boxes. We live in boxes, and these boxes have walls on them, and they become prisons. Our preconceptions, our prejudices, and our fears build walls, and we can never truly be happy as long as we're afraid. And so we have to kind of let go of the fear. We let go. We have to be willing to honestly let go of the fear. If you see something that is causes fear, then challenge it. Say, what is it? What is it that I'm afraid of? Why am I afraid to grow? Why am I afraid to experience? Why am I afraid to learn? Because that's all the things that we miss by being afraid. So if we can let go of that fear, we can let go of the boxes that we feel so comfortable in, and reach out to something new, jump, strive, do something you never thought you would do before, do something you never thought, I could never do that. Why not? Right? So I'll get to the end. I was teaching, there was this group of Japanese students that would come to our department at UH. And it was just students from a Japanese university, Buddhist university in Japan. And they would come every summer, and there were maybe 15, 20 of them. Actually, I'm sorry, they were high school students that had been accepted into this school. So after high school, they would come and they would spend like a month in Hawaii, and we would teach them some classes. And so I was a graduate student at the time. I was an MA student at the time. And so this was 40 years ago. And so all these students were there. And so I was told, tell them about Hawaii. Tell them about all the various things in Hawaii. I thought, one of the most amazing things in Hawaii that for them is very new is multiculturalism. Because in Japan, there's not really multiculturalism. There's Japanese, right? And at least, and especially 40 years ago. So I was talking to them, and I said, so, you're going to meet all these new people here and stuff, and you might get interested, and don't be afraid to talk to people. In fact, how many of you, remember, these are high school students, so these are like 17, 18-year-old students, and you know that they're going to be there, and they want to have fun, and they want to meet people, maybe. So I said, how many of you would be willing to date while you're here? Maybe to go out on a date with somebody who's not Japanese. Anybody? Nobody raised their hand. They just looked at me like, oh no, I couldn't do that. How many? Oh, and so they and then I saw a few kind of looking maybe, and then I said, how many would be willing to actually, you think it'd be possible to marry somebody who's not Japanese? And they went, and visibly, I mean, so many like, oh no, absolutely, I could never think that way. And this one girl was kind of looking around and she went, she raised her hand like for about 2 seconds and then pulled it back down again. It was like this kind of spontaneous, she jumped out of her box. And I just thought, how wonderful, right? But then she jumped right back in it again. But that's us, that's what we do. And too many of us still feel so comfortable in those boxes. And I think that the most important thing for me as an ascetic was to say, is to understand, and my teachers always told me, every box is a prison. Don't live in your box. Don't confine yourself. Because if you confine yourself, you are confined. Right? Be conscious, and consciousness is awareness. And so being confined and being conscious are like almost contradictory. And so we have to be constantly opening, constantly striving, constantly looking for something greater, because there's always something greater. No matter what we experience in life, there is always something greater.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great look into this idea of fear and all the different steps that it leads to. I think it's from the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna's teaching, and really beautifully told. Yes, thank you so much, Ramdas.
Sure.
I have a question that maybe you could give a few thoughts on, and then we can open it up to the group.
Yeah.
And that is why do we have a fear of spiritual striving?
Sure. I think the reason is because we have been taught to be afraid. Once again, fear God. Why would I want to strive for something that I'm afraid of? You know, and that's why the mystic traditions have been so wonderful for us, is that they teach us, no, experience love, experience beauty, experience compassion. There's so much strength, but also we're uncomfortable with the things with which we're unfamiliar, right? And so we're familiar with the world. We're familiar with the duality of the world. We're familiar with our comforts. We're familiar with our difficulties. Spirituality, well, that's a whole new thing. I don't, no, too much for me, right? Because they know that there's a part of themselves that tells you, you will change. You will die. You will die to the world that you know. And people don't want to die. They're very comfortable. When I was working at the prison, many of the prisoners that I counseled wanted to stay there, right? Because that's what they had become comfortable with. They didn't want to leave. I had one prisoner who was in there for murder. He was in there for 30 years. And when he was about to get out, he said, you have to go to the parole board and convince them to let me stay here, because if they won't do that, I will kill somebody to come back. And so we live in our fears, and we become so comfortable in our prisons that we don't want to leave them. And I think that's what it is. Spirituality is just something too far removed from their consciousnesses.
No, thank you. I think that's a great start of an answer. Why would we not dare to strive to follow some sort of spiritual path? Bob?
Well, I think this might be somewhat related, and I'd be curious what Ramdas thinks about it. You know, when we go away and we do strive, we go to school, we go to a new place, and, you know, at some point we become different people. And then when we go back to our home, to our high school, to our family, we suddenly become what we were when we were 6 years old or 13 years old. We kind of revert, and it's like our habits, even when we broke free of them, they're still kind of there. And it's, as William James said, they're ruts that never quite ever go away. And I'm wondering how you relate to that when, you feel like you've made great strides, and then suddenly you're pushed back into, realizing that, well, I'm still that same kid.
Yeah. I know many people experience that when I was a sadhu. That's why when you become a monk, they change your name, right? And my teacher said, never use your previous name. That you're dead. That person is now dead. Your birth date is the day you took initiation, and move away from it, because things do suck us back into old ways, and we need to learn, and we need to grow, and we need to move beyond. That's what happens with prisoners, right? And that's why we have a recidivism rate of 70%, because it's natural to go back to old habits, and those old habits are what got them in prison in the first place, right? So, and Bob, for those of us who are striving on the path, that's what we have to do. We have to let go. We have to let go of those patterns that kept us bound, and we have to change. A wonderful friend of mine, a Vedanta nun, and I think I probably mentioned her here before. She once talked about her life, and she said, when I was a kid, I loved Barbie dolls, and she said Barbie dolls were my whole life. I couldn't think of anything else, right? And then when I was 13, I heard the Beatles, and all of a sudden, there goes Barbie dolls. Now she becomes a Beatle fan, so she found something greater. And all of a sudden, the Barbie dolls were meaningless. And when she found spirituality, then that became greater for her, right? And so when we find something that is truly genuine, that's what we have to stick to. And we have to realize that's really who I am, because I'm not that old thing. That has died, right? That life died a long time ago. And even when we go back to when I would go back to my home and I would see my relatives, sometimes I hadn't seen in 20 years, they'd say, "You're so different." And I'd say, "Yeah, I hope." Right.
Veena, did you want to comment on that idea of why would we be afraid to spiritually strive?
I think fear is a very interesting emotion. Let it be spiritually, they all are interconnected, and it's the fear of unknown. What a friend of mine, who's a Christian scientist, told me, fear as a false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. So like the Vedanta says, when we have seen a snake and we see a rope, and we are afraid of this rope because we think it's snake. The whole life is that, because we are wired into being afraid, because anything unknown, anything, as a child, we are not, but we are taught, okay, this is hot, this is this, don't go here, this is dark. Then this has been happening to us for who knows how long. So I think that's the undoing that and trusting. And then the spiritual striving requires trust. And like Ramdas ji is saying, that is once you experience the beauty. So every time I have done anything new, I'm afraid. But the second time I do, I'm not so afraid. And the third time I do, I get more comfortable. And then when you do like asceticism 100 times, 200 times, striving, then it becomes joy, like athleticism, right? So I think it's all what Ramdas is saying. Is the key is striving. We don't know what the goal is, but we know kind of idea of the goal, but the striving is the goal. I think that's what I think you're trying to say. So thank you.
I think Veena ji, what you're saying is so important, and thank you for bringing that up. The striving is the reality, and the progress, the process. I mean, not progress, process, the process. The goal is really secondary. It's the process. How do you live your life? Not what do you accomplish? How do you live your life? And that is where we become, that's how we learn who we are, through our process. So thank you, Vinayji.
Eriko, did you want to make a comment on that question of why we might not dare to strive?
Well, actually, I have a different question, so maybe a little bit later.
Okay. Well, I'd like to bring up an idea based on the Buddhist tradition and the story of the Buddha sitting in meditation, and what an assembly of, I think they have been called demons and so on, that he had to face during this meditation of his. But really it's, all the human fears and so on, I think that he was facing. And if I understand the story, the last and the most difficult one for him to face was the fear that after all of this striving and all of this effort that he had done, he might fail, in the sense of it would make no difference to the world at all. And I feel as though I can relate to that being a fear, is that, oh, I didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I taught soccer. I was a soccer coach for many years. I'm a referee now, but I was a soccer coach for many years. And I started out teaching 5-year-olds, coaching 5-year-olds. And then as my son became 7 and 7-year-olds, etc. And what was interesting is they understood that it was a process. Soccer was having fun, winning. They weren't sure what winning necessarily was. They were having fun. And when they got to the point of saying, there were scores, and so no matter what the score is, coach they would come to me. They say, "Coach, did we win?" I go, "Yeah, you won." "Oh, yay!" But they didn't know. And what was more, even when they got to be like 10 or 12, "Hey, coach, did we win?" "Hey, there's pizza afterwards." "Oh, okay." Then they forgot about winning, right? Because the process of enjoying life. And I think that's what we have to look at is, are what we doing bringing joy? Is it bringing joy to us? And more important, is it bringing joy to others? Because if we're causing pain to others, we're really not happy. We may be sensually being satisfied, but we can't be truly happy if we're causing pain to others. And so to be truly happy means making others happy as well. And that's what we have to look at. Can I find a place, can I find a way of life in which beauty is a constant process? Love is a constant process. Compassion is a constant process. If I find a way where I can integrate those into my life, then I have a wonderful life. And if I haven't been able to do that, then I'm not very happy. I noticed there was a question about silence.
Yes. That was from Carly, and then maybe we can take up Eriko's question after.
Okay.
Carly asked, what are some of the spiritual benefits of vowing silence in respect to the rediscovery of self through natural vibrational expression vocally? In other words, who you are, does that also equal who you are not?
Yeah, the importance of silence is that silence gives us an opportunity to listen. Very often when we're talking, I say something to you, and before I'm even done saying, you're already developing a response. So in other words, you're not really listening to what I'm saying. And then you're saying something to me, and I'm getting ready to respond and not really listening to what you're saying. And that's what we do in life, is that we don't listen to everybody. We just talk, and then we get a chance to talk some more. And when you're in silence, you have to listen. And it's amazing. I've done long periods of silence, and I found the first time I did a lengthy silence, afterwards, I found how much energy it took to talk. Because along with talking came thinking, and wow, that's really gives us up a lot of energy. And so I found that it was I just wanted to go back into silence. And it's amazing, the power that you get within from being in silence. Really, if you do a long silence, you'll have to sleep less, you'll have to eat less. You'll find your mind hopefully will calm, because you're not having to challenge anything except yourself. But of course, that can be very hard. But that's really the goal. By being silent, you go within. And by being silent, you begin to see who you are. So you self-reflect. And as you self-reflect, you begin to see yourself. And when you begin to see yourself, you begin to see who you are. And once we can get past the demons and realize that all those demons are just our own creation, and you get to the beauty, and you realize actually the beauty is our own creation too. And so then whatever you want in life, it's your own creation. You can create it. Do you want to create love and compassion and a beautiful world? Then you'll be able to, no matter what else is going on. I had my students read Dag Hammarskjöld, and I mean, many of you probably know who Dag Hammarskjöld was, but read his autobiography, which is not, I'm sorry, it's not autobiography, it's a diary, and it's called Markings. And he wrote it, and you read it during the time that he was, he was UN ambassador, Secretary General of the United Nations for I think 8 or 9 years. He was the superb. He's the one who made us all think that the United Nations is a wonderful organization, because under him it was. And you read his diary, he never mentions anything on the outside. He never mentions about who he was, the people he met, where he went, the deals he brokered. He never mentions any of that. All he mentions about is the self and his striving and his need to know himself. It's amazing. It's beautiful. That is what we need. And that's what silence brings us, the realization that our truth is within.
Okay, let me weigh in on, if I might be so bold, 2 questions at one time, because they're both excellent questions. And I see, I'm working on kind of processing both of them as the same question. The question about why is there fear? I'm sorry, your question, Renee. Can you repeat that question, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Why are we afraid to strive along a spiritual path?
Good. Yes, thank you. When you ask that question, Renee, I imagine you to be a young child, perplexed at all of this conversation about striving, and for the young child, I would imagine life is full of growth and excitement and expansion. The things that Ramdas has been reminding of as being so important. This expansion and learning and unlimited growth, I think, is the world of the child. And from that world, there's no need, I think, to find, there's nothing, no obstacles to learning and growth and expansion. The whole world is that way for the young child. So I think, Renee, your question is very charming. Reminds us of that standpoint that we all started out with having. And that standpoint, I think, is the same as silence. Let me qualify that. The silence that adults understand, I think, best is the opposite of the obstruction to clarity or whatever we're striving for. And for the child, I'm thinking, there's no logical contrivances about the opposite of this and the obstacle to that, and everything is, I would imagine, for the child, a playground, unlimited borders, and just everything is a playground. The beach and the sandbox and the cafeteria lunch at school, I, I imagine. And so I'm thinking that with silence, there can be a relative silence that is the opposite of that obstruction to clarity, you know, the opposite of this and obstruction of that. But I think my guess is that from the standpoint of where we're born, everything is silence. Everything is clear, uncategorized, unboxed, kind of purity of expansion. And there's this energy that comes with that opportunity, I'm thinking. And so from that standpoint, Renee's question would arise, I think. Why is there fear? What obstacle is there? What is the, you know, silence that is the opposite of this other thing that's the obstruction to this other thing and such? Everything might be this great joy I'm imagining. And so I'm sorry if this is not a good answer to either question, but I do think that your questions are remarkably pure. And I think that reminds us of a standpoint from which we might be able to look at all of this. So kind of along those lines, maybe it's not so much striving that we need, or let me say that again in a different way. Maybe every time we use the word strive, I think we could use this other phrase that Ramdas used, letting go. So for example, daring to strive. What if we thought daring to let go? Or, you know, instead of practicing silence, what if we talked about doing that which we all started out with having? I'm thinking just kind of. So anyway, thank you for letting me ramble on about the questions.
About striving for, or the fears and striving spiritually, and going off of what the speaker before was just talking about, just the word in itself, strive. So I definitely looked up the definition of strive, and it came: make great efforts to achieve or obtain something. So just in the word itself, I could see where spiritually one would feel some fear and aspects of a fear of productivity, maybe, and the spiritual process of living. And so really just, you know, opening up to that in an aspect where you're just getting more in tune and in touch with just living life, just processing, enjoying life, like Ramdas was talking about. And yeah, that was pretty much my comment on that.
So that letting go that Robin mentioned appeals to you in that regard. Ramdas?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think what Robin said was terrific. And two things that I think is very significant: the state of a child, right? I mean, we're told that Jesus said, until you become like a child, you can never enter the gates of heaven. A friend of mine wrote a song once, and it was, children are the not yet people, to the gods they do belong. And when you reach the age of doubt, then from heaven you are cast out. And it's this idea that simplicity, and the children show us the joy of simplicity. Children can turn anything into a toy and can have fun. And we have to try to get back that simplicity in that approach to life. And the way we do it is the other thing that Robin said, which is letting go. We have to let go of our ego. We have to let go of our desires. We have to let go of our expectations. And we have to let go of our fears. Right? And then we can become simple.
First, I can contribute one about fear of striving for spiritual growth on the like a Japanese perspective. That because in Japan, I think it's an image of like many kind of like a bad image of religion. So if somebody like try to strive for spiritual growth, it's like kind of like getting off the mainstream and then just kind of like an outcast or be different. So it's just a little bit fear to be different, I think. So that was something I thought about on Japanese perspective. And my question is about fear that I have a particular example that it's like more than 20 years ago, my friend's purse got stolen when I was sitting next to her, and nobody saw it was coming. But when we realized her purse, like she was just putting on her side and it was gone in Las Vegas. And then from there, I'm afraid of like my purse gets stolen, or I have a fear. And then that time I have only my camera in her purse, and I'm not, I don't worry about my camera, but I was sad about losing picture we already took. So that was like forever got lost. And also like we have to go through we have to go to police station to file a report and then go to embassy to do the her passport and stuff. So it was like a lot of hassle. So that's kind of fear I want to let go, but I carry this fear up to now, like fear of like my purse stolen or something like that. Is that and then I probably have a little bit attachment to the thing, but also I fear of if my purse got stolen, like all the trouble, like if I have to go get the driver license again, like those kind of like hassle, like I want to avoid. So this kind of fear, like how do I get rid of, like?
Okay, what I would say to you is, how many times has your purse and all those things been stolen?
Well, never, except
okay. All right, you've just answered your question, right? So you spend all this time worrying about something that's never happened, right? Don't worry about it. You be careful, but don't worry about it, right? Because so I was at Ramana Maharshi's ashram in it was Arunachalam in central India, South India. And I met a Jesuit monk there, Jesuit priest. He had just gotten he had just been ordained, and he was English, and he had written about Ramana Maharshi. So he decided he wanted to go there. He wrote to the ashram and he said, "Can I come and spend a month in retreat?" And so they said, "Sure." So he showed up there, a small little train station. So he set his backpack down, had his camera, had his money, had his passport, had everything in it, and he kind of went around the corner to pee, right? And when he came back, his bag was gone. And here he was in the middle of nowhere, and he had nothing. All the things that you were talking about were gone for him. And so immediately he went into the train station, found somebody who spoke English and explained what happened. And they said, "Don't worry about it. We know where the ashram is. We'll take you there." And so he had somebody taken there. So went to the ashram. He told them everything is gone. And they said, "Don't worry." And they gave him a room, gave him a towel, gave him sheets, and he was there and for a week, right? And he had nothing. And then what happened? He said one day, and I met him, this was 2 weeks after this happened is when I showed up. So he told me this was a recent thing that has happened to him. So after a week of not having all that stuff, there was a knock on the door. The policeman was there with his backpack. And he said, "I think this is yours." He said, where did you find this? And he said, some kid in a village was carrying this around and people recognized that this didn't belong to this kid. So they grabbed him and made him tell him what they got it. And then they turned it into the police. And then the police found his ID and figured he was a Westerner. He must be there for that ashram. And I said, how did you feel? He said, I felt so disappointed. He said, for a week, all that stuff was gone. I didn't have to think about anything. He said, now I could actually experience the freedom that Ramana Maharshi was talking about. And then after a week, it all came back. So sometimes losing those things is actually a blessing.
I have the opposite approach if I'm afraid of something, which is I magnify it. I take it to the nth degree. What is the worst possible thing that could happen if what I'm afraid of were to occur? And then I ask myself, well, could you get through that? And I almost always go, yeah. And then it really helps disappear and fade the fear. Like, okay, well, if I could imagine getting through the total worst case scenario, and I'd still be okay. All right, then I can let that one go.
Absolutely.
I've done that too, Renee.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, I've done that. When I was practicing law, I used to think, oh, I made a mistake. And then I start getting anxious about, what could happen and all this. And then I went through the whole thing. Well, then I'd lose a client, I get fired, I'd stop practicing law, maybe I go to the beach every day, I don't know. But I really got into accepting what would be the worst possible consequence. And once I got comfortable with that, I thought, okay, no point worrying about that anymore. One other thing I've done too is I was thinking about what she was talking about, worrying about her purse. If you just get in touch with the feeling, just kind of sit there with your eyes closed and feel what's it like to lose your purse? What was it like when your friend lost? Just get those emotions and just accept them. And once you get comfortable with them, then you can just let it go. But just really experience the whole thing psychologically, mentally, and then let go. Because let go is the answer at some point, but you can't always do it without a little processing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's the same thing if I wanted to kind of answer my own question about, what if in my spiritual striving and all this effort, it goes for naught? It doesn't make any difference. Mm-hmm. Well, but, and this is something Ramdas and others have said, but what about the way of getting there? Is the effort in itself so worthwhile that that's enough of a reason, even if it doesn't seem to make any difference in the end? It's just the effort to do it is that, or the path, traveling that path. And did I along the way maybe make myself a little happier so I was a easier person to be around, or something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a really difficult decision I had to make. At least at the moment, I thought it was difficult. I was a young monk, and I asked my teacher, what should I do? I have a real problem. What should I do about this issue? Should I do A or B? I don't right now even remember what A or B was. Probably pretty irrelevant. But at that time it was important, right? And he said, okay, think of yourself 10 years from now. And what do you think you wish you would have decided? And I said, 10 years from now, it probably won't make a difference. He said, then it doesn't make a difference now. Right? If it's not long-term disaster, don't worry about it. Right? Let life happen.
Ramdas, I really, really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. You have some experiences that very few people in the world have. And it's a great blessing to hear you get us started on the thought process, because what comes to my mind is you're not really trying to tell us anything except how we can go deeper in ourselves. And it's greatly appreciated, and you're a great blessing to the community. I hope that when you go to India, you'll go even deeper into yourself, because who knows, we could live another 50 years.
You and I definitely will, Roger.
Thank you very much. And I also wanted to share a message that I received through a fortune cookie literally yesterday that just resonates a lot with it resonates a lot with what we were talking about. And it said, "Nothing dared, nothing gained."
Perfect. What a beautiful ending.
Very nice.
Thank you all so very much. What a wonderful way to spend a Saturday afternoon, evening. Thank you so much, Ramdas.